I've got to be honest, every time the HS2 story comes on the news, I just think, flick over. I really do. I'm ashamed to say it, but there are some big stories I think, there was a big news night programme about it the other night on BBC Two, and I watched it thinking, I've got to try and get interested in this, and it exposed an awful lot about, the huge cost. We're looking at a high-speed rail project to join London up with Birmingham and ultimately Manchester. We're looking at £42.6 billion, so it'll be £100 billion by the time it's finished. If it ever starts, if it's ever finished, it will be 30 years plus. Who are we kidding? Not a single government project has ever run to budget or on time, or even close to it. So I think it's a bit of a nonsense in terms of the money. But you know what? It doesn't really bother me. It's not my problem. You know why? Because I don't live along the rail route, do I? I'm not living in one of those little country cottages that's going to be affected by all this blighting of the countryside that goes about with this multi-billion-pound project. And then on Saturday night, I was meeting with friends, a couple of whom live en route, but they live in Camden. They said, well, of course it's going to affect Camden. They said, of course it's going to affect North London and West London because the route goes into Euston. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. It never occurred to me. It never once occurred to me in all the coverage of this that this is actually a major issue for London, not an issue for the rural countryside dwellers who always moan about even a lamppost going up. And it turns out that the areas affected across North and West London are rather more than perhaps most of us expected. Maybe you like me. Maybe it's just because I'm thick. I don't know. Maybe because I'm thick. But I was thinking, well, there's Euston. Yeah, fair enough. But people who live around Euston will probably expect a bit of noise and building work here, And then there's the countryside. The HS2 line, phase 1, which is the first bit to Birmingham, will go through. And let me know if you live in any of these areas. Camden, Chalk Farm, Swiss Cottage, Kilburn, Queen's Park, Maida Vale, Kensal Green, Acton, along the Western Avenue to Perivale, Ealing, Greenford, Northolt and Ruislip. Forgive me, but isn't that pretty much most of northwest London? Huge swathes of our city are going to be affected. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to be affected. I had genuinely not recognised or twigged this at all until Saturday. I want to hear from you. Should HS2 go ahead? And are you now, having just heard this, a little bit more worried than you were before, given that this today is the day when the latest legal challenge to the HS2 high-speed rail project has been rejected by the Court of Appeal. Objectors included residents' groups and 15 councils along the route who had asked judges to order a further assessment of the scheme as a whole. The judge dismissed all 7 grounds of challenge against the London-Birmingham section of HS2, that's phase 1, but said they could make a final appeal to the Supreme Court. I want to hear from you, genuinely. Had you actually registered at all that the HS2 line was going to affect you if you live anywhere around North or West London? And by the way, if you don't live along the route, you don't have to live along the route to be affected. I don't live along the route to be affected. My friends I met on Saturday are actually going to have their home bought, compulsory purchased, because they live so close to the route. But the traffic chaos that is going to ensue when this work starts is going to blow our minds. And we're not talking for 6 months. We're not talking for a year. We're talking for years. 0845 6060 973. Should HS2 go ahead? Are you going to be affected if you live in one of these areas? I'll read the areas out again before we go to the traffic and travel update. I want to know, are you worried about the HS2? Or had you always figured, not really my problem? I don't care. 0845 6060 973 is the number to call to have your say. Let's talk now to Peter Jones. He's from the Pan Camden Group, very much involved in the objections to the HS2 rail project. Thanks so much for joining us, Peter.
Good morning.
Good morning. Afternoon, sir.
Afternoon, yeah.
Obviously been a long day for you already at the Court of Appeal. I have to say, I beg your forgiveness, really, for this is a topic I should have been talking about for the last year. And genuinely, I don't think I've read anything that's told me this is going to massively affect large parts of my city.
Well, I think, first of all, railways are never a sexy subject.
True.
We saw with the West Coast Main Line that massive incompetence in the Department for Transport was heading for a disaster. Fortunately, Richard Branson was able to stop that nonsense. But it's not an interesting subject for most people. But as you rightly mentioned earlier on, that we're going to have 10 years of a massive construction project in the heart of North London. This is going to affect the lives of everybody for a radius of many miles. there are going to be 300 lorry movements a day. It's going to be rather like an open heart surgery procedure on a patient while the patient's still working at his desk.
And again, a lot of us will say, well, I don't live right near it, and often people will be needing to use the roads, go over the bridges, the railway lines that are going to be massively affected.
Yes, and indeed, one part of the plan is to take down the bridges across Camden to put in an HS1, HS2 link, which is a crazy idea because you can just walk along the Euston Road from Euston to St Pancras if you wanted to make that link. But I think it's the uncompensated loss that businesses in Camden are going to feel, businesses across North London are going to feel as transportation snarls up. For example, Hampstead Road is going to be taken up for part of the process.
And of course, no one uses Hampstead Road at all, do they?
No, not at all.
It's virtually a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, on Euston Road, which is, it's mostly unused, as you say, we'll have 300 lorry movements a day along it.
Goodness, I mean, again, it is extraordinary how much this is going to affect you, and yet how much it's been pretty much ignored. If I ever see anything on this subject, it is always about the terrible blight to beautiful parts of the countryside. I have never heard, read, seen anything about the fact that the whole of North London, or the West Side, but again, across the whole of North London, because, as you say, roads like Hampstead Road and Euston Road are such key arterial routes, are going to be affected. We are talking about major traffic jams, major issues for commuters across London.
Indeed.
For a best part of a decade.
Yes, that's correct. And the best part of it is Londoners will be paying for the privilege because there will be a levy on those areas which are perceived to be benefiting from HS2, and London is one of them, so Londoners will have to pay for it.
Wait a minute, I'm going to have to pay for the benefit of getting to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker, when I don't actually... I mean, look, I was born in Birmingham, but I still don't feel the urge to get to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker to be high on my list of priorities.
Yeah, so local councils will be expected to contribute because of the benefit that they will perceive to be receiving, even though our local council in Camden sees that the uncompensated loss in our area will be around about £1 billion. That's £1 billion of loss for businesses and individuals that will be imposed upon.
So the fact that you might have moved somewhere, and I certainly when we moved to Art, we live in Camden, but when we moved there, we looked deliberately at journey times and checked tube routes and things. So the fact that and traffic routes, the fact that people may have moved somewhere and chosen to live somewhere because it was convenient for getting to work, getting the kids to school or whatever, the fact that they may face disruption for 10 years, there's going to be no compensation for that. But apparently we are going to have to pay extra on our council tax
Absolutely.
Peter, do you know what? I'm feeling a march coming on.
And there are 300 people who are going to be out of their house and home, and at the moment there are no plans to rehouse them in the borough of Camden. And so the burden of that probably will fall upon Camden Council and the ratepayers.
But it's not just the 300 people who will lose their home. It's also the people who, like my friends, who will have a home that will be blighted, will lose all value, and their homes are going to be purchased, but they don't want to move. They want to stay where they are.
Exactly. But
and how many people are affected by that? Because my understanding would be exponentially bigger.
Well, we've actually asked the question of HS2, and they refuse to give us an answer. They say we've given you a map, work it out for yourself, which we thought was rather sweet of them.
That's very nice. You think with all that those billions, 42.6 billion, they might be able to hire someone to do that. So leaving aside the costs, leaving aside the benefits, leaving aside whether we need this or not, leaving aside how long it will take, all of that nonsense. And that's a big debate for the economists and everything. The fundamental fact is we in London are going to have to pay for the privilege of facing 10 years of traffic chaos.
Yes, you'll pay as a UK taxpayer. You'll pay as a ratepayer. You'll pay in terms of your inconvenience, which won't be compensated for. If you're a householder along the line and you're going to be compulsory purchased, you'll pay in terms of lost value on your home because the additional compensation is being capped at 40 grand over the perceived market price. So it's bad news for everybody, really.
Well, Peter, on that delightful, happy note on this beautiful sunny day, absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm so glad we finally talked about this subject. Peter Jones from the Pan Camden Group. OK, I'm going to guess it's not just me. I like to think I'm fairly well informed on matters of national and London interest. Genuinely, I had no idea. I feel absolutely stupid to the core for not realising how much this would affect huge parts of London. Camden, Chalk Farm, Swiss Cottage, Kilburn, Queen's Park, Maida Vale, Kensal Green, Acton, along the Western Avenue to Perivale, Ealing, Greenford, Northolt and Ruislip. And if you live on either side of those, anywhere around there, you ever even drive anywhere near, or you go into central London, maybe down the Hampstead Road, across Euston Road, you are going to hear about and you're going to know about and you're going to feel the effects of the HS2 line. So, should it go ahead? 0845 6060 973 is the number to call. That's 0845 6060 973. This is LBC 97.3. The time now is 1:18.
LBC 97.3.
We're talking about a subject that I absolutely, until approximately 9 p.m. on Saturday night, thought was one of the dullest stories around. Doesn't affect London. It probably won't ever happen. I don't really care. It's just NIMBYism. It's just NIMBYism. That's all it is. Talking, of course, about the HS2 rail project. It's the high-speed rail project to link London with Oop North. High-speed rail, high-speed 2, phase 1 is linking us to Birmingham, and then it's going to go on to Manchester and to Leeds via Sheffield. It's not even going to happen until 2032. Well, the idea is it all should be finished by then. Who are we kidding? It's not going to happen that soon. Genuinely, partly there'll still be objections and appeals, but also because we've never had a project come in remotely on time, and we certainly haven't had one come in on budget. And as it is, the budget now is up to 42.6 billion. Now, there are lots of things that need doing in this country, and I think vast majority of people think that a high-speed rail link between London and Birmingham and Manchester and Leeds is perhaps not top of our priorities. Indeed, many of the people in Birmingham and Manchester and Leeds say it's not top of their priorities, and they're the people it's supposed to darn well benefit. But if you've ever heard about this, it's about whether or not we need it, it's about huge costs, and it's about the terrible damage, the blighting to the countryside along the way. I've never, again, it might just be my total ignorance, I've never come across anything about what it's going to do to London. But just in case you weren't aware, and I wasn't aware until 9 o'clock on Saturday night when my friends who live along the route, directly on the route, pointed out, it's going to affect Camden, Chalk Farm, Swiss Cottage, Kilburn, Queen's Park, Maida Vale, Kensal Green, Acton, going along the Western Avenue to Perivale, Ealing, Greenford, Northolt and Ruislip. You think, well, I don't live there, so it's all right, I don't live next to a rail line there. It's going to affect every single person in the vicinity, and indeed anybody who's going to be driving through, I don't know, Euston Road, Hampstead Road, major arterial routes that will be closed for years. Possibly we are facing 10 years of a massive construction project. As Peter Jones from the Pan Camden Group, who are part of the appeal process against this, across the heart of North London. It's going to affect miles and miles. We're going to have 300 lorries trips a day along major routes. A load of the bridges across Camden are going to be taken down. I hate to tell you, you don't have to live in Camden to use any of those bridges. It's going to bring transport to a standstill. You've seen how bad it is just with a few stations being done around Tottenham Court Road and the like, and on Oxford Circus. It's going to be chaos. It's as simple as that. I hadn't registered this. I have a funny feeling I'm not the only person who didn't register this. Forget the countryside, and I'm worried about the countryside as well, but I had no idea that London was going to have such a big impact. Had you? And are you worried now? I want to know, should the HS2 project go ahead? 0845 6060 973 is the number for you to call. Let's talk to Steve, who is in Ruislip along the route. Hi, Steve.
Hi, I've sent you in a couple of photos as well, just to show you the route from Harefield through to the A40, where 800 trucks a day are going to go through. When you see the pictures, you'll be baffled as to how they're going to be able to get down the road in question.
And that 800 trucks figure, that comes from official documents?
Oh yes, absolutely. We're talking about some of the roads being onto the A40 being closed for huge periods of time. So the congestion around Swate Clears, Hillingdon, Polish War Memorial is going to be immense. The trouble it's going to cause people coming in and out of London for that 7 or 8 year period that they're talking about is going to be immense. And I can't see where 42 billion is ever going to be recouped, let alone the fact that most railway companies are subsidised anyway. Why aren't they just putting in better quality rails which fast and stock can run on? That's not going to cost anywhere near 42 billion. It's baffling. But to cut through, take out an entire golf course in Ickenham. Okay, the golf course isn't the point here. It's the point that to get through, they've actually got to cut through an entire residential district, come through a golf course, then come out of a cutting, take out basically, part of Buckinghamshire and, up to Tamworth, where none of them are even thrilled up there, is just crazy.
So this is going to affect any commuters who come in from the northwest of London. Now, I've just been handed your photos that you've sent in, and we are talking about a very nice, pretty rural road, lovely, that wonderful trees joining over the top of the road, and you're telling me that road is going to take 800 trucks a day?
Well, yeah, and I've got to tell you that is Ruislip, believe it or not. That is part of Ruislip. It goes through from through Harefield and from Ickenham up towards North Ruislip. It is a really heavily used road. It may not look that heavy there. I actually stopped up to grab that, and my passenger took another picture.
Steve, can I ask you though? My guess is, okay, you're the first person to call on the board, and my guess is you're not one of the people who, like me, were in blissful ignorance until 9 o'clock on Saturday night.
No, and the entire community.
But are you? I suppose you talked about how this project is baffling. Are you also baffled by why people aren't talking about the effect on London?
No, because in the immediate community there has been a lot of talk and a lot of upset, and whether it's Denham Village, which still is affected by the A40, the fact that there's going to be a huge station, if you like, that they're going to station trucks at just on the other side of the A40. This has really upset a lot of people. And down in Northolt, it's upset people. It's going through, Acton. It's going to just hack the heck out of Acton. And it's baffling that they put no thought into what people really think. And when I even met individuals, just like your previous gentleman said, I've got to tell you, the attitude was ridiculous. The fact that they're going to blight our neighbourhood, come in, pick it up, drop it once they've finished using it, and not even offer the vicinity of a neighbourhood like a sports centre or some sort of facility by way of,
no compensation.
No compensation for them.
But Steve, you're going to get the benefit of all these people being able to travel down from Birmingham 20 minutes quicker.
Yeah, but yes, exactly. Straight down to Euston for our neighbourhood.
It's absolutely laughable, Steve. Listen, I'm going to have to leave it, my darling, because we're hitting 1:30, and I'm constantly being late for the news because I'm so engrossed in the phone calls I'm getting. 08456 6060 973. If you, like me, had no idea this was going to affect London, but you are living somewhere in the vicinity of North or West London, or you commute in, I'd love to hear from you. It's not just me, is it? Tell me it's not just me who wasn't aware of this. Why are we not in London completely up in arms about this? Why is no one talking about this? I know why I wasn't. I was living in blissful ignorance. Should the HS2 line go ahead? Do we need a high-speed link to Birmingham? Do we need to get to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker? I've been to Birmingham. I was born in Birmingham. Trust me. I don't think getting there 20 minutes quicker is a benefit to anyone. No offence to anyone in Birmingham. If you live in Birmingham, I know some people listen on digital. If you're in Birmingham right now, tell me, how is it going to improve your life if you can get to London 20 minutes quicker? 0845 6060 973 is the number to call to have your say. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer on LBC 97.3. The time now is 1:31.
LBC 97.3.
Now, I'm talking about HS2, the High-Speed 2 rail project. Today, it's in the news because the Court of Appeal has rejected the latest legal challenge to the rail project by residents' groups and 15 London councils in London and others along the route. They'd asked judges to order a further assessment of the scheme as a whole. They had 7 grounds of challenge, all were dismissed by the judges, but they did say that a final appeal could be made to the Supreme Court. Even while I read out those 3 paragraphs, I was bored. Even while I read that, I thought, I don't care. But you know what? We really should care. Really, really should care about this. This is going to affect London. Not just Euston, not just like the 15 people who live around Euston Station where the high-speed rail link gets in. No, if you live in take a deep breath here. Camden, Chalk Farm, Swiss Cottage, Kilburn, Queen's Park, Maida Vale, Kensal Green, Acton, along the Western Avenue, Perivale, Ealing, Greenford, Northolt, Ruislip. It's going to affect you directly. If you happen to commute through any of those areas, and if you live anywhere north or west of central London, you probably do, it's going to affect you too. We are looking at up to 10 years of a huge, epic construction project. It's going to involve huge numbers of lorries every day. It's going to involve bridges coming down, road closures, major arterial routes being closed, jamming up with lorries on the major routes like Euston Road. And extra benefit, we get to pay for it. Because apparently we're going to have a huge benefit from people living in Birmingham getting to London 20 minutes quicker. Or, if we want to go to Birmingham, getting to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker. So we're going to have to pay through it through our income tax and indeed through our council tax as well. Aren't we lucky? Well, I'm trying to work out what the best benefit would be about getting to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker. I'm thinking it's 20 minutes more in bed before you get your train. Can anyone think of any other benefit? I want to know why we've not been talking about this. And I blame myself for my ignorance as well, but I want to know whether you are worried about this. I live in the Camden Borough, so I know I'm going to be affected by this. It hadn't occurred to me until my friend on Saturday night was telling me, yeah, you are. Yeah, you know that bridge near you that's not been open for a bit, you thought was a bit of building work? That's not going to be open for 10 years. I'm going to be affected. My guess is at least a quarter of the people who are listening right now are going to be affected. And I think that, like me, you hadn't got any idea. I think most people haven't got a clue they're going to be affected because you think, well, I don't live in a pretty cottage along the main route and I'm going to have a compulsory purchase, so what's my problem? I want to hear from you if you live in anywhere north or west London or on the outskirts and you commute in. And I want to hear from you across London. You happy to pay for a project which is going to give, let's be honest, pretty much zero benefit to any of us and is never going to make money. You know the Eurotunnel? Have ever got the Eurostar through to Paris? Brilliant, absolutely wonderful. Lost billions. Never made a penny. They say they make a profit now. They don't. They had to write off tens and tens of millions of pounds. Never made a profit. What are the odds that this is going to make a profit? Choice between Birmingham and Paris? I know which one I'd choose. 0845 6060 973. Are you worried now about HS2? Maybe you've always been worried. If, like me, you've just found out, this is going to massively affect me and my route to work and to school and home every day, I'd like you to call in. Do you think the HS2 project should go ahead? 0845 6060 973 is the number to call to have your say. Just a minute, we'll talk to Robert Oxley from the Taxpayers Alliance. First up, let's talk to Mika, who's in Grays in Essex. Hi, Mika.
Hello.
Hello. Now, you're not going to be affected in Essex, are you?
No.
Phew, lucky you.
Yes. But I think as I'm a bit of a rail enthusiast, but I think it is a stupid idea. The whole thing is just stupid. Because if you're going to be building a railway, you're going to have to do it sensibly. And just ploughing it through the middle of London with no common sense just doesn't. It defies common sense.
Well, I suppose. There's no point in having a rail link that goes to sort of the outskirts of London. It's got to go into the heart of London.
Yes, but an easier thing to do would be to finish a project they started, but then they said, "Oh, it's too expensive." But I'm sure if they finished it, it would cost £42 billion.
What project?
They were going to upgrade the West Coast Main Line, which is the current railway, for high-speed operation. Yeah. And they bought new trains and everything, but the signalling was never completed.
You're
and
right,
they abandoned it because it was too expensive.
But then they're going to go for something that's far more expensive. What about the argument that, look, we're in the 21st century, our railways were, like a lot of Europe, our railways were built very early on in the Victorian years, they're ancient, we need to get with the programme, and yet everyone's opposed to every major construction project that's ever existed, but we're all happy when it's actually started, or when it's finished.
Well, you don't get too much opposition to Crossrail. But I think Crossrail is needed. Yeah. And other projects like that, even Crossrail 2, what they're planning. Yeah, it's an absolute pain in the backside, but there's going to be a net benefit to everybody. Yes, because right now, to get from Essex to Heathrow by public transport is abysmal. It's just the Piccadilly line is the only cheap option. Heathrow Express is too expensive. Crossrail will link these parts of Essex to Heathrow.
But we have to actually get a benefit. Yeah, we're paying for it, but there's a lot of traffic chaos, but you can actually think, well, I can see why we need that, which is different. Mika, lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much. And let's talk to Robert Oxley, who's from the Taxpayers Alliance. Hello, Robert.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Good afternoon. Should we be building the HS2?
I don't think we should be, and I think it's more than just those people affected by the construction works who should be worried about this, because we're all going to end up paying for this line. It's going to be a white elephant. It's going to cost every family in this country at least £1,500.
Whoa. Let me stop you there.
Yeah, there you go there. Over £50 billion. And the problem is the government, what they're doing is they're basing this business case, the reason to put the line, on some very dodgy assumptions. And they've underestimated the cost of the line, and now they're having to row back from that and admit that actually it's going to go up. And we've seen this happen over the last couple of weeks. And they're also hugely overestimating the benefits, and they're ignoring the fact that some parts of the country are going to get a worse service. The average business passenger using this line is going to be earning £70,000, and they're still going to face a 27% fare inflation. What we're seeing is families, ordinary families from Clapham to Camden, from Coventry to Newcastle, who are going to be paying a lot of money for this line. It isn't going to deliver the results, and it's only going to benefit a fortunate minority. So I think we should be opposing HS2, and importantly, when you're making this big kind of infrastructure decision, you've got to make sure you get the decision right. This is one of the biggest infrastructure projects this country's ever decided on.
On the few occasions I'd even paid attention to this before I realised it was really affecting North London. Again, entirely my own ignorance on this front. I've yet to hear a single argument that from anybody who thinks this is a good idea. Who came up with this, and why this project rather than any other?
Well, look, this was originally a policy of the last government, and it was championed by Lord Adonis. And even ministers back in that government, now like Tom Harris, a former rail minister, he's actually said this is the wrong decision. And the problem is that the proponents of HS2 haven't made a comprehensive case. In fact, it's quite clear that their business case is based on some dodgy assumptions. They assumed that when we're on the train, that none of us work. That's one of the ways they kind of arrive to this idea of how much we would benefit from going from Birmingham to London half an hour faster. They've had to now suddenly admit that wasn't the right assumption to make. They've had to admit that to a parliamentary committee, and now having to rejig all their numbers. So the weak business case for HS2 is getting even weaker.
How important is it that people travelling between Birmingham and London get there that bit earlier?
Well, it is one of the fastest lines already. And
that's what I thought. Whenever I've had to do that journey, I'm always amazed by how quick the journey is.
It is one of the fastest lines already. We are a relatively small country, given the high-speed, the case for high-speed rail. And in fact, there was a much stronger economic case behind High-Speed 1, the link between London and Paris. At that point, you were competing against people who might fly, and you were opening up basically another continent. And even with the stronger economic case for that line, HS1 hasn't done well. It's again failed to deliver on politicians' promises, leaving families picking up the bill. And yet this is what we're seeing again, is HS2. There's this cosy political consensus where politicians are pressing ahead with their vanity project, which is going to be a white elephant. It's going to cost every family a huge amount of money. And, there has been consistent opposition, and we are seeing more and more people wake up to the fact this isn't working.
Well, including me. Can I just say one thing? The budget now is £42.6 billion. Listen, I've just even putting in a bathroom or a kitchen, or anyone who's had put a patio in, will know that whatever the cost is in advance, add 50% at least.
Well, it's things that ministers went round during the time when they were struggling to get HS2 through. They made a variety of promises, and they've kind of underestimated some of the impacts on London. So you can expect another £10 billion on Crossrail 2. Euston will have to be completely redesigned. Various areas to mitigate environmental impacts like cuttings, verges. That's extra billions of pounds, which ministers have made promises to various areas to try and keep them on side about not receiving a worse service, which is all going to stack up. So even on their own estimates, they've increased the total cost to about £45 billion. That's £8 billion more than the last time. They haven't included the cost of the actual trains, the actual rolling stock. And yet we know that there are many other hidden costs that politicians are hiding away for, all along costing families a lot of money and only benefiting a very small number of people. We need to get infrastructure projects in this country right. There are millions of rail users there who receive at the moment terrible service. People who are stuck on overpacked, poor service commuter lines who would think, actually, that kind of level of investment could be spent more wisely, could be spent more efficiently, and not cost us so much in the process.
And as you say, benefit people an awful lot more. Lovely to talk to you, Robert Oxley from the Taxpayers Alliance. Not many people who are in favour of this. An awful lot of calls on this. I have to say, we'll find someone who's in favour of it in just a few minutes after an update on the traffic and travel. Alison Monroe, who's Chief Executive of HS2 Limited. If you want to me to put a question to her, tweet me right now at JuliaHB1. That's at JuliaHB1 on Twitter, and I will do my best to put your questions to Alison Monroe, who's Chief Executive of the HS2 project. Right now we're talking about a subject which until 9 o'clock on Saturday night I thought was totally and utterly boring and irrelevant, nothing to do with me, Gov, until I discovered that actually it was going to affect pretty much everywhere where I live and where large swathes of the city in which I live. I'm talking, of course, of the HS2 high-speed rail project. You thought it was just going to go through lots of pretty bits of countryside and lots of NIMBYs were all complaining about it. Well, actually, it's going to start in Euston. It's going to affect huge swathes of North and West London. And if you happen to have the misfortune of having to drive through huge swathes of North or West London, anywhere into the centre of London near Euston, you are going to be affected by it, and for many, many years ahead, if it does get the go-ahead. £42.6 billion is the latest budget for HS2. Bet my bottom dollar that it'll cost a lot more than that in the end. I'm asking, are you worried about it, and should it go ahead? 0845 6060 973 is the number to call. And let's speak now to somebody who's, I think, the first person I'm going to speak to today who supports the HS2 project. It's the Chief Executive of HS2 Limited, Alison Monroe. Alison, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
Hello there. So, who does support HS2?
Well, there's a lot of strong support for High Speed 2. If you talk to our northern cities and business leaders, they can see the real benefits that High Speed 2 will bring, and the fact that action does need to be taken now to address the capacity problems that are increasingly emerging on our railways. So there's strong support from many people for High Speed 2.
My understanding, actually, one of the big demands in the north of England, particularly between Leeds and Manchester, is strong links across country rather than north-south. They do business with each other as opposed to with the south, and actually they'd have far more benefit, and there's far more demand for stronger rail links between, say, Leeds and Manchester than between Birmingham, Manchester and Leeds and London.
Well, those cities are highly supportive of High Speed 2. They see the need for connections between the cities. The really important thing about High Speed 2, the second phase of it, is it provides really good links between places like Manchester and Birmingham, Leeds and Birmingham, journeys which are really slow and difficult to do at the moment by rail. So they strongly support. High Speed 2, of course, isn't the only investment that the government will be undertaking, but it is very important for those northern cities to bring them closer together, and they can see the enormous benefits that will flow to them from being places that business will want to go and locate in, places people want to work in. So I say they're strongly behind High Speed 2.
Well, yes, except the trouble is there's been a lot of assumptions made in terms of how much this project will benefit people business-wise and journey-wise. And a lot of those assumptions have been exposed as being completely unrealistic in terms of the number of passengers who are affected. When any independent economists and transport experts have looked at the figures, they've exposed them, frankly, for the complete, let's face it, sham that they really are.
Well, that's completely untrue. If anything, I would say our demand forecasts them on the cautious side. What we are forecasting is half the rate of growth that we've seen in the past. Over the past 15 years, we've seen a doubling in the number of people using the railway. We're predicting that rate of growth slows, and then effectively we're not assuming any growth beyond 2036, which is a very cautious approach. I think we could well take the view that growth will continue well beyond that. So I would disagree with what you say about our assumptions. I say we think we've been cautious. There's a very strong business case, but not only the benefit-cost ratio numbers, but the wider arguments, the need to address capacity on the railway, and the wider benefits that High Speed 2 can bring to our cities by linking them up together.
Well, look, our cities are already linked up together. How on earth does someone travelling from Birmingham to London in 20 minutes, 30 minutes less time, or the other way round, make any difference whatsoever?
Well, it does make a difference. There's evidence from other rail schemes around the world. If you look at what High Speed 2 has done, for example, look what's happened in France around Lille and Lyon. The arrival of high speed rail does make a difference. But first and foremost, this is an issue about capacity, particularly between London and Birmingham, where existing capacity is already becoming very full. The railway is already fragile. By the middle of the next decade, the line between London and Birmingham and Manchester is essentially going to be full. So first of all, this is addressing the capacity issue, which we need to do. If we want our economy to thrive in the future, we need to have good infrastructure, and the cities recognise that need for good infrastructure.
Isn't there an expectation in the 21st century, with the advent of technology, Skyping and other sort of conference calling, that actually people are going to be travelling less, not more, for their business meetings and their business dealings?
Well, you just have to look at what has happened in the past. There have been enormous advances in technology, the use of video conferencing, the use of email, mobile phones, all that sort of stuff that's happened over the last 20 years. That's all happened at the same time as we've seen a massive growth in the use of the railway. There's no evidence that these sorts of developments will mean that people stop travelling. In fact, some people argue that it actually leads to more travel because it frees up people's time to undertake other trips. So looking into the future, we don't expect that to fundamentally change the forecast that we're currently making about future demand for travelling by rail.
Well, you say there's lots of support up north for this. There's obviously not that much support down south because lots of people can't really work out what the benefit is, and people like me have been left in blissful ignorance about the effects on my city and my local area. Has that been deliberate?
Well, there are real benefits to London as well. And I think it's unfortunate if we're not managing to get that message fully across, but there are real benefits to London.
They are?
One of the big benefits is that the existing railway is becoming increasingly full, and what High Speed 2 does is release capacity on the existing network, which will allow, for example, more commuter services into London. So places like Milton Keynes, Watford and so on, which at the moment are facing very high levels of crowding, will become even more crowded in the future. Those places will be able to have better services when High Speed 2 comes.
In 10 years' time? Well, not 10 years, at some point when the project is finished, they won't have better commuter services or indeed anything like the service they've got right now while the project is undergoing.
Well, any big infrastructure project is going to obviously cause some disruption while it's happening. I don't think anyone would say that we shouldn't do anything at all. So whatever solution we go for will cause some There are also benefits to London around Euston. You mentioned Euston. This provides a real opportunity. I don't think many people would actually say that Euston Station is the most fantastic station that we've got. This provides a real opportunity to improve Euston Station in the longer term, opportunities for that area to really develop in the future as well. Another opportunity on the west of London around Old Oak Common as well. So there are massive opportunities for London as well as the cities.
£42.6 billion for HS2. You and I both know it's going to cost a lot more than that if it does get the go-ahead, because there's never been a public project that hasn't cost way more than we've been told in advance. How can we justify that sort of spending, albeit over a number of years? I accept that. At times when we are cutting our emergency services, at times when we're cutting our maternity services, at times when we can't afford to build enough houses or get enough primary school places. How on earth is it possible for any sane human being to think that a quicker rail link with Birmingham and Manchester and London is the top priority for every single person in this country? Well,
first of all, we don't accept that the costs will keep on rising.
Do we have a bet, Alison? Should we have a bet on air right now about that you say the cost of HS2 will not go above 42.6 billion? What do you want to bet? Bet for charity right now.
Well, I'm not a bettor, but I would say that figure is a 95% confidence figure. But perhaps if I could address your other, if you could let me address your other points. The point is, do we actually want to have infrastructure that will allow our economy to continue to compete and succeed in the future? The government has to take decisions about whether that sort of expenditure is justified. The real reason for that initially is to provide capacity, which we need to have if we want a strong economy going forward. That's the judgment the government has made. The money will be spread over a 20-year period in terms of the expenditure, so it can be afforded, and we will be doing everything we can within High Speed 2 Limited, the company that I head, to make sure that those costs are kept under control and that we do not use all of the contingency which is allowed within the figure that you quoted.
One final question, very briefly. We're coming up to the news. Will it ever make a profit?
Yes, in terms of the operations, we believe that it can make a profit.
Even though the Eurotunnel has never to this day made a profit.
And these big infrastructure projects very rarely cover all of the initial capital outlay, but we would certainly expect it to cover its operating costs.
Oh, OK. As long as we ignore the actual £42.6 billion cost, then it will make a profit. Oh, well, that's how we do our maths, then we'll all be OK. Alison Monroe, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I wish you'd accept my bet. There's a lot of money for charity available there. I'd have thought. Chief Executive of HS2 Limited. What did you make of that? I'd love to hear your reaction. 0845 6060 973. Right now, we're talking about HS2. If I ever thought, honestly, if before 9 o'clock on Saturday night, if you had told me I would ever do a show about HS2, let alone carry a topic on after the top of the hour, when I've been talking about it for an hour, I would have just laughed in your face. I thought this was the HS2 high-speed rail project. It's between London and Birmingham and then on to Manchester and Leeds. Frankly, it's got nothing to do with me. I don't care. I don't live in the countryside. It's not going to affect my home. I don't live in Manchester or Birmingham. And frankly, I don't travel to Birmingham that often that 20 minutes off the journey time would make any darn difference to me. But I didn't realise till I spoke to a friend on Saturday night that it was directly affecting him and his partner's home in Camden. In the same borough where I live, because their home is effectively going to have to be sold because it's right over the line. It's going to affect huge parts of North London and West London. And if you drive through any of those parts of London, trust me, it will affect you. We are talking about up to 10 years of a massive construction project across central London, affecting miles and miles of roads, bridges coming down, hundreds of lorries every single day, transport, traffic, chaos, and all for the budget price of £42.6 billion. Interestingly, if you had just tuned in before 2 o'clock, you'd have heard me speaking to Alison Monroe, the Chief Executive of HS2 Limited, who insisted she wouldn't take a bet on whether or not the budget was actually going to end up being higher than £42.6 billion. Then I offered a bet for charity. But no, she thinks she's 95% certain it won't go higher than that. Seriously, I'd have put a kitchen put in, it went up by about 50%. That's just a kitchen in one room, for goodness sake. If you live in the following areas, or you ever drive through the following areas, this will affect you. And it won't be for a weekend, it won't be for 3 months, it will be for the best part of a decade. So, Camden, Chalk Farm, Swiss Cottage, Kilburn, Queen's Park, Maida Vale, Kensal Green, Acton, along the Western Avenue to Perivale, Ealing, Greenford, Northolt, Ruislip, Hillingdon, we're told by callers, also affected. The reason we're talking about it today is because the Court of Appeal has rejected the latest legal challenge to the project from residents' groups and 15 councils along the route, including a number of London councils. They wanted a further assessment. The judges said no on all 7 grounds of the challenge, but they said they could make a final appeal to the Supreme Court. I don't know whether they're going to win or not. These projects have a funny way of getting their own momentum. But I want to know, are you worried about it now? Should HS2 go ahead? It's going to cost a fortune, money we don't have. It's going to take years. It's going to cause chaos. And I'm still, even after speaking to the Chief Executive of HS2 Limited, not convinced by the business or economic case at all. And I'm not a NIMBY. And I'm not a banana. I build absolutely nothing anywhere near any one person. I think we do need major construction projects. And sometimes we have to live with the downside. But I'm just not sure this is the project. 0845 6060 973 is the number for you to call. As soon as we get a phone line free, I'll ring the number. I'll give you the number again. But right now, we're going to get through as many calls as we can. So many coming in. Jote is in Ealing. Hi, Jote.
Hi, Julia.
Hello. What do you want to say?
Well, basically what I want to say, I'm really astounded that we're even considering this project seriously. I think, having listened to the CEO there, when you asked her about this project, she talks about, the economy, the benefits of the economy. I would have thought, if you and I had that kind of money, we'd want to fix the basics in this country first. And I think you alluded to it. But for me to just flesh it out further, what about Heathrow? What about, putting some money into there? What about our public transport in London at the moment? Adding some more money there that could come from the HS2 project. That probably makes more sense to us as an economy, to improve that. And she also cited the fact that, in France, it's worked very well to build these railway lines between cities. What she didn't say is actually France has put a lot of money into other parts of the, sort of transport infrastructure, such as roads, etc., which help the economies there of local cities. So I think it's a flawed argument.
But also, France is, for a start, it's a bigger country, and a lot of the railway lines, they are going through different kinds of terrain and not such built-up areas. I mean, you cannot compare like with like. It's like people talking about the bullet train in Japan. If people have not had that infrastructure, or it's been bombed to destruction in the Second World War, then it's a different argument. We have had these railway lines, and my understanding is actually we've got some of the fastest rail routes in Europe.
Yeah, I think they're really efficient, Julia, and I think it's just a question of just investing a bit more on what we have already, especially in the southeast. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was I'm in business. I have business contacts in the north. None of them have actually ever said, "Oh, I wish we had a faster train line to London." None of them,
and no one has ever said we wish we had a faster train line to Birmingham.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, she did actually say that, the ministers up there or the officials up there are really keen for this. Well, you would be if it was your constituency. Of course you want money spent in your area. So it's a completely flawed argument. And I was like you. Until today, I wasn't worried about it because I thought it's such a senseless project that it wouldn't go anywhere. But now I am a little bit worried because, obviously, after today's judgment, it could be taken seriously or even more seriously.
Indeed. Jose, lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much. He's in Ealing. Mike's in Cheshire. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Julia. Good afternoon. My point is very much this, that London could have this HS2 and virtually be unaffected by it, even hardly notice it was there. The government is totally illogical. In fact, they're bordering on stupid. You don't go to the north of England from London via the Chilterns. You go due north out of the capital. That's the fastest way to the north of England. Now, if they forgot about Euston and leave these poor people who are likely to be kicked out of their homes, and if they built the HS2 terminus at the new Tottenham Court Road Crossrail station, that's 4 stories below ground. And then
you still have to have all the digging up, even if it ends up being underground.
Well, they are already building that station. It's well underway, Julia, at Tottenham Court Road. It's huge.
Yeah, I know.
And it could have some additional platforms on the north side for HS2. Then they could run it out of London up towards the M1 in tunnels. And if they want a connection with London Overground, the tunnels would pass somewhere beneath Finchley Road and Frognall, so they could connect it to the Overground. And quite frankly, nobody would really know it was there. But this business of running it through West London and destroying property and affecting the lives of hundreds of thousands of people is just totally unacceptable.
Yeah, and I would say borderline bonkers. But Mike, you're right. Again, with ways of doing it where we could be unaffected. I'm not involved in the construction. I'm not involved in the money side of things. But there is yet to be a project that has actually made the money or fitted the projections. All of these projects. I don't mind if they say, look, there won't be much benefit. This is why we're doing it because it's crucial. Because in 50 years, blah. They're not. They say there's this massive benefit. There has never been a major transport project that has lived up to the ridiculous claims that are made in recent years. Look, it's different. I'm not talking about building the M1 motorway, the first motorway. These are major arteries. It's not like we don't have a rail line between these cities and London at the moment. Last time I looked, they still existed. Lloyd is in Ickenham. Hi, Lloyd.
Hi, Julia.
Hey, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I'd like to know what's actually going to be happening with the excess traffic flow through from the Swatelys roundabout down to Harville Road. In fact, it's be 750 more trucks going down there, and what the government's going to do to actually,
I think you'll find that you'll just be sitting in traffic behind them, my darling.
I know. The problem is at the moment, the 2 roads from Swatelys Road and Harville Road, I work down there all the time, and they are an absolute nightmare in the in traffic.
So there's already a traffic problem. Well, here's what's going to happen, Lloyd. It's going to get worse. But luckily, you get to pay for the benefit of it getting worse. So that's good. But hey, if you fancy going to Birmingham in about 30 years' time, it's going to be a lot quicker. Well, you see how I made it all better? There you are. Paul's in Holland Park. Hi, Paul.
Hello, nice to speak to you. Hi, very interesting subject. On the matter of this HS2 project, how much time did you say it would save going up to Birmingham?
Well, I've read 20 minutes. Some people have said 30 minutes, but in terms of that journey time, it's in the region of 20 to 30 minutes.
Well, I mean, the only reason why I think anyone would want to build another line to Birmingham is so that people can leave that city as quickly as possible.
Now, play nicely with the Birmingham. I'm born in Birmingham. No, I'm with you. It's actually, look, I've got to be honest, it's a very different city from the one that I left when I was 7 years old. It's a very beautiful city. It's amazing developments. But again, it may even be beneficial for people in Birmingham. But there'll be lots of other things that will probably be more beneficial. Cheaper.
And that's actually the point. I have no problem in principle to big infrastructure projects, but I'm a little bit suspicious about something, and it's not about tinfoil hats and all of this, but what I worry about is this. We need to have a little bit more transparency to do with the movers and shakers and the idea that it's got into someone's head to build this to the point where they're literally going to ram it through regardless of public opposition. And I need to know who's in line in terms of the actual construction for what would have been one of the biggest government-funded paydays of all time as far as a private contractor is concerned, because they'll be the ones building it, and the connection between them and the movers and shakers who want it so much.
Do you know what, Paul? I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, again, it's like whenever there's a major a bit of roadworks going on in my local area in Camden, I always just say, oh, right, so the cousin of some councillor or council official has needed some extra work, has he? I mean, and that's the thing. I think you're right. I think, Paul, we are going to have something's going to be exposed in years to come. I'm not accusing anyone individually because, hey, I'd get in legal trouble for that. But I can't help believing that Paul is right, that someone is going to benefit who knows they're going to benefit. And, with you all the way, Paul. 08456060973. I'll take calls on this just for the next few minutes until 2:30. Then we're going to talk about Nazi hunting. When is it ever going to be time to forgive? Can we ever forgive what happened during the Nazi period? Is it time to stop hunting 90-year-old men for what they did wrong 68 years ago? Or is it never going to be time to forget and forgive that? 08456060973 is the number to call. Do keep your calls coming in on the HS2 as well. The time now is 2:17. Good afternoon, I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is LBC 97.3, London's biggest conversation. We are talking about HS2 and the high-speed rail link, and I'm amazed by how many of you, like me, have finally woken up to the fact that this is going to have a massive effect on huge parts of London, not just Euston, but across London. I've had so many calls and so many texts and emails. Only one. I'm going to read that. The one that is in favour of HS2, Shaky on the Isle of Dogs, says, Julia, I rarely leave the East End of London as I work from home. I'm all in favour of this new train line. Sure, it will not affect me, but that's not the point. I hate to tell you, Shaky, I think it might be part of the point, at least. He says, the point is it'll be good for business, and that is the most important thing, isn't it? All of those against, including you, are just whining, moaning NIMBYs. Get over it, you moaners. It's going to happen. Jeff is in Hertfordshire. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Julia.
Hello, you are just a whining, moaning NIMBY. Get over it.
I'm not. I don't use the railways, but I thought that was Shakinori I was listening to with that Alison Munro. It was a load of guff. It's absolutely terrible. The devastation it's going to be caused to people's lives is absolutely dreadful. The stations are being built away from the city centres, so the time you save is going to be negated by getting into the city centre with traffic jams.
Such a good point.
What's the point in that? Also, I do remember reading some time ago, I don't know how true it was, that this is a directive from the EU that we have to build it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, no, there couldn't be. It couldn't be that we had to build it. I mean,
I did read that by one of the commentators in one of the magazines that it was an EU directive. It should be a continuation from Europe.
Because there was this whole thing, isn't it, about it joining up all the major cities, and I'm all for that.
Right.
I'm just not so sure that £42.6 billion is what I want to spend so that some businessman or some tourist can travel from Birmingham to Paris without having to change stations. I'm just not sure that's my top priority right now.
That's right. I think it's going to become a bit like the M6 toll road. It's going to be a white elephant.
Do you know what, though? I love the M6 toll road because when we go up to visit the in-laws, we get to avoid Birmingham, which is good for people in Birmingham and good for us. I'm not dissing Birmingham at that point. I mean, because of the traffic, they don't want us driving through, do they?
No, but there are a few people. I've never used the M6 toll road. I wouldn't on principle, but I understand it's always quite lightly traffic.
That's
why it's going to pay for itself.
That's why it's a great road for those who use it. But again, that's it. I'm sure if and when this is built and I have to get a train to Birmingham and on to Manchester, I will go, oh, isn't this lovely and quick? But I don't think, oh, isn't this lovely and quick is a strong economic argument to spend more than £40 billion.
If you were saving, say, an hour in journey time, yes, but for 20 minutes, It's complete devastation.
This is the key. If we got that journey, if it was literally like 30-minute commuting time, that would be brilliant. Although, to be fair, as one person who's tweeted me, although I've lost the tweet, but it's a very, very good point, that actually, if you did cut the journey time so much, you just make Birmingham commutable more to London, all you end up doing is pushing up property prices in Birmingham. And then making homes unaffordable for people in Birmingham. I mean, you just create another problem. Stephen's in Shoreditch. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well. What do you want to say, sir?
This is an issue of, well, let's talk about people and how they make money. Mm-hmm. People make money by investing their money well. You can have a nice job and live, but if you buy the right house and it appreciates in value, then you do an awful lot better because of it. What we have here is a situation where there's a large lump of our money, the balance sheet, the assets of this country, and it's going into this project, which is HS2, and it doesn't produce a good rate of return. In fact, it probably produces a negative rate of return, and that's incredibly destructive. It is my personal belief that HS1 was actually one of the things that caused the recession to be so long and difficult at the start of the 1990s.
And HS1 was the link to Paris.
That's right. And now we fly, or we can take a coach.
I've got the link to Paris. I mean, a few times, and it's absolutely fabulous. But again, I'm not so sure that I'm not so sure it's a great. I mean, I suppose I support that more, but only because I've used it, and that's. But I don't think other people. I don't think someone living in Newcastle, for instance, should have to pay for me to have an easier, cheaper way of getting to Paris.
But it doesn't work as a business. The investment into the HS1 project didn't make a profit.
They had to write off billions.
And economically, we are trying to make ourselves a prosperous future, and we are investing £45 billion in a project that is actually going to have a negative return. It's going to cost us money every year. It's going to cost us capital at the start. It's supposed to be priming the pump for the economy, but you'd be better off priming the pump with profitable projects, of which there are many. There are kids here in East London and Shoreditch screaming out for money to start very exciting businesses.
But also
we could lead the world.
Build somehow. What's the one thing we need? Houses. Another thing we need, primary schools. I mean, this is the thing. But I'd like to point out, though, we had Alison Munro on only half an hour ago, the chief executive of HS2 Limited, put up by the Department for Transport. When I asked her about the Eurostar, the Eurotunnel and HS1, basically never making any money, she said, well, it does run a profit if you ignore the costs. I mean, seriously, how did I not laugh out loud at that? Or maybe I did, actually. Lena's in St John's Wood. Hi, Lena.
Hi, Julia. I wanted to just comment on one of your callers who hit the nail on the head. I want to know who's getting the big paydays. Because to me, all it sounds like, such a ridiculous project, absolutely no viable benefit whatsoever if you've done what you guys have obviously all done your reading. But it just makes no sense. So I want to know who's getting the brown envelopes. Why can't we find that out now before it goes any further? Because
there will be a major inquiry into this. In 30 years' time, there'll be an inquiry into this, won't there?
But that's what I mean. Why would we wait until all those billions have already been spent and then, people get done for it so many years later? It makes no difference. By that time, all the disruption would have happened, the billions would have been spent. But I think it's important now to find out who are getting the brown envelopes, who are going to get the fat backhanded payouts, because that's all I can refer to it as.
Lena, I have a horrible feeling you're going to be right. Gary's in Edgware. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Julia. My comment's very quick. The fact is, I agree with you. It's utter waste of money. We don't need to get to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker, and nor do they need to get here 20 minutes quicker. You could waste that in the tube network, wherever you're going to, or on buses. So the big issue for me is that they're spending all this money that they could run. For many years, they've been talking about increasing the length of trains. Mm-hmm. If they want more capacity, the rolling stock is capable of running at 12 carriages long. So they just need them to extend stations, which is a much, much cheaper job.
Yeah, I was just going to say to you, surely it's constrained by the length of the stations, but you're right. I mean, most of the stations, the station platform finishes at a fairly random point. You could just extend that. You're right.
And the reason the network is as it is because that's what people want. People don't want to go right out into Oxfordshire and that way to get to Birmingham, because whilst it may be 20 minutes quicker, the actual route along the way is not attractive to anyone. But if you look at the rail networks that we have, they are popular, and metropolises have built up around those rail networks.
Indeed, Gary, thank you so much. Final call on the topic. I do apologise we've not got to any more. We've got loads of calls still on the board. Can I say how much I love you guys for joining in? Because genuinely, if someone had said to me we're going to do this last week, I'd have said absolutely not. I'll resign on the spot if you make me talk about HS2. It's boring and it's irrelevant. It's not boring, it's not irrelevant. We need to talk about it more often. We will talk about it again. I think we started a revolution today, London. 0845 6060 973. Listen, get in touch with me. If you have any more information, you can help us out. Get in touch with me, julia@lbc.co.uk. You can also tweet me at JuliaHB1. If you've got more information on HS2, anything we need to talk about, need to publicise, need to do to help the campaigns, I think we should get involved. I really do. I had no idea until Saturday night that it was entirely... I was living in blissful ignorance, and I think it's time that London didn't live in blissful ignorance anymore.